Chapter 10 focuses on adult learning in the digital age. And regardless of whether it's in which modality, whether it be face-to-face, it's online, it's a blended kind of modality that you're using to deliver the instruction, whether it be in a formal, non-formal, or informal, we are all using or connected to these types of technologies because they've become somewhat ubiquitous, whether it be a YouTube movie, or we're going to use some sort of poll, or even using something like PowerPoint or Prezi. These types of technologies have come in an instructional setting, have become known as tools. But something in your text really resonated with me. And it was a quote by Parker. And the quote said this: technology is not just a device that is utilized as a tool. That's what everybody usually says it is. Rather, technology has infused every aspect of society to essentially change the thought process in learning. And quite honestly, there's a lot of research going on in this area. But I had to ponder that for myself. Have I seen that played out in my own life? And the answer is yes. On Sunday morning, when I go to sit down to read the Sunday paper, I am always looking for my phone to keep it right next to me so that as I read the paper and I see a statistic or I see a word in some sort of context, a subject I don't know about, and I want to know more, I can quickly grab it and say, ask a question, type in a question, Google something to answer that question. It is me learning more about that topic. And so when you take a look at how you actually think about things daily, consider how often you reach for technology. I'll give you another example. Several years ago, when Google launched Chrome, their browser, they incorporated into where you would normally have to know and place the URL web address, Google search engine. And in fact, recently, Firefox added this to theirs as well as Safari. But Chrome was the first one to do it. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So when you open a Chrome in your browser, you can type in here the exact URL. You know exactly where you're going, and it will take you immediately to that web page. But let's say you were just trying to find something. You don't have to actually type the search part down here in Google. Google set as my home page. I don't have to launch the Google website, type it in here. I can go right into the URL bar and ask the question, when was Chrome released? And there it is. And that's the other thing. It starts to populate your question. And there's the answer to September 2nd, 2008. So pretty recent, about 8 years ago. But I use this, and I'm sure you do too, to look up all kinds of things like how long does it take to cook? And see how it's finishing my thought? A turkey. And in there, then I will get tons of returns. And in fact, it will scour the web. It will grab, in this case, a website that puts forward all the different things for that particular topic, in this case, turkeys. In addition to that, I can go and watch, or I can read some web pages. I can find some movies. Sometimes the movies will pop up here. And by the way, search engine optimization, SEO is what that's referred to. Sites that have been hit the most are populated at the top of a Google search engine. So apparently watching movies about how long it takes to bake a turkey is not there. But maybe if I put, how to baste, whoops, let's get that, to B-A-S-T-E, baste, an egg or baste a turkey. There we go. That's the one that I want. And then I get the main statement on that. And then here's a wiki. And there's a movie, Kitchen Daily. I can watch a movie about how to do that and increase my learning, answer my question. I am motivated because I have to learn about a turkey because there's a whole bunch of people coming over. But that's something that was brand new and integrated. And I find myself sometimes when I'm thinking about a question, as I'm going through the thought process of asking the question, I know I'm turning to a digital resource for it. I automatically, before I have reached for that device, have the search terms in my mind, which used to be really important. Used to have the search terms. They used to have to be exact and quotes and that sort of thing. And still to this day, if you're searching for something that might be misconstrued based on the words and the content you're looking for, you might have to say, whoa, those two words have to go together. They can't be separated. And when you need those two words to go together, if you put it in that Google search engine in that Google bar, that Chrome bar, and put quotes, it will only search for those words when they are together. And so, yes, that's still a technique and a tool, but I find myself thinking and answering questions before I go to the device, how I'm going to get there. Has it changed my thought process? I would have to answer yes. It changes my thought process about how I can learn something when I don't know how to do it. If I need to change the screen because it's broken on my cell phone, if I need to replace a flat tire on my bike, if I have to remind myself about how to baste a turkey, I can reach for this thing. So much so that I believe in your chapter it says something, are we getting stupid because of Google? And because Google can answer so many questions, why do I need to know this? And that's why you'll see a lot of new curriculum, or in the case of like the next generation science standards, they've turned away from content. Say it again. They've turned away from people needing to know content. The content is there. People research it, they post it. Not everybody has to know that. What they focus on is the process, problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, a couple of soft skills. Those are the kinds of things that I'm seeing in not just secondary curriculum, but in post-secondary curriculum. We know the content is there. Let's focus on the process. So I thought that was a really interesting statement, and maybe think about ways that you think society has changed your thought processes as you go through this. So questions about technology in context. What impact does technology and our digital age way of thinking have on our teaching and learning? To me, a great deal. I am always looking for those other voices, those resources, those critics, and I don't have to guess what they are. I don't have to go to the library. I don't ever have to leave this office. All I have to do is be able to use correct search terminology and put it together and know how to refine a search when I'm looking, when I'm not getting the results that I want. Sometimes I have to look at something else to grab the word that maybe is used. I may not always know the appropriate term that's going to be acceptable that others have published something by. But if I kind of go down that vein and I see some other word being used as a tag, then I'm able to grab hold of that. So what impact does it have on our digital way of thinking and learning? A lot. I think that we have much more access to resources and content. And the beautiful thing about that in terms of adult education and would be andragogy and pedagogy, we can now focus on the method. We can focus on the methodology. We don't have to always focus on the content. When I started teaching, and I did teach high school for 5 years and middle school for 2, I am going to heaven, I had to order all kinds of materials, big binders and books, and occasionally even go to the library. And this was way before the days of the internet, just to get the content that I needed, let alone work on the methods and the motivation and the exploring that my students were going to do, and the evaluation or the assessment that I was going to use at the end. In some ways, it's extremely liberating. The downside, of course, is sometimes you can search something, and I didn't look here on my turkey example, but you might get 45,000 different returns, maybe many more. In fact, let's look here. 405,000 returns in 0.7 seconds on how to baste a turkey. That means that we have to become good at discerning good information. That means we have to always look for the opposite oftentimes, especially if it's something that could be controversial, by searching things like critics of, or critiquing, or a review of. Those are really important techniques. And your chapter does a really good job of helping you to decide what is a credible and non-credible resource. I think this is critical as we work with learners who are going to turn to the internet as a source of information. How do we determine what is credible? What evidence, what research backs up a particular claim, or is it just an opinion? I've actually made a list of this in my area that I work for agricultural literacy. I've created a lesson called, it's actually not even a lesson, it's really just an activity called your sphere of influence. And in the sphere of influence, we talk about different points of view and why people might hold different points of view. But more importantly, I might discuss what you should consider when you're looking at any kind of evidence or resources that are giving their what may appear to be claim, or at least their opinion, and how can you then sort that out and go determine if you actually think that they have something that supports that. So that's how I think it's changing our way of teaching and learning, and I think we could go on about that in much more detail, and obviously your chapter does as well. How connected are we? Does a digital divide really exist? Chapter starts out talking about the digital divide, and serendipitously I found a video came across my desk earlier this week that I'm going to share just about the first minute and a half, 2 minutes with you, and see what you think about this digital divide. Some of you are actually perhaps on the other side of the divide. So some of you are on one side, some of you on the other, and some of you might be walking across a tightrope in between.
I'm here to talk about a divide in this country. There are many of them, but a divide we don't talk often enough about. And it's a divide that separates these people and these people. These folks are digital natives. That means that they're born into a hyper-connected world, and they believe everything should be on demand in real time. These folks, not so much. These folks are digital immigrants who have come to this not when the technology that's popular today, they were born before today's popular technology was available. They were born, in fact, before the folks who founded the technology were born, and sometimes before their parents were born. It's the digital natives that everybody covets: advertisers, marketers, employers. And the reason they want digital natives to work with them and for them is because digital natives are fearless. They embrace technology and they love technology. But let's not forget the digital immigrants. Digital immigrants bring something else to the table. They bring perspective, history, understanding, and they know the potential and the pitfalls of technology. Digital natives only know the potential of technology. Now, I bring an unusual perspective to this because I am a digital immigrant.
I'll post the link to this video if you want to watch more, but I really wanted you to hear what he had to say, and I think maybe that photo that he showed at the very first part resonated with you. But he talked about digital natives being fearless. But when we were looking at an individual who is a digital native, and that would be probably, mostly Gen Xers, we're talking about people that are about 35 years old and younger. They're completely comfortable with any kind of technology. I've seen 2-year-olds pick up iPads and make them work. Conversely, you give that to someone who maybe hasn't been spanning that digital divide very much, and they're on the other side, they have fear. Will I break this thing? What's it going to do? Is there something that is there a some sort of side effect or downside to me using this technology? And so he talked about folks on the other side of the divide, which would be primarily baby boomers and people born between 1945-ish and 1965, 64. It also brings perspective and history and potential along with the pitfalls. They've seen things fail. They have also maybe a skeptic when they should be. Sometimes they're not skeptical enough because they say, well, if it was placed here, it had some clout, and that means it's true. And in fact, that's a problem with, and your text talks about that, with folks who see things on the internet who haven't gone through that process of how do I determine whether something is credible here. That people fall victim to that kind of ploy on all sides of the equation or all sides of the divide. We are very connected, and your text cites some statistics I think are a little bit old, a little bit dated, because technology flies. And I think that I would pretty much glance over all of those statistics and say all of those have gone up. And so I actually went out looking to update some of those statistics for you. And let's just take a look here, and I think that I have that one here. Yes, digital natives versus digital immigrants. We just watched that movie, and now global concerns. And I have used Wikipedia. This one of the things I like about this webpage, and I've mentioned this to you before, if you're using anything from Wikipedia, is that you want to go down to the bottom, and they will have all these footnotes where the references for where they got that data. So especially if there's a number one and you question it, you go down here and you say, is this a biased source? Is this a legitimate source? But they keep a pretty good accuracy on this, and it says this is a list of countries and numbers of internet users as of 2013. They're defined as persons who have access in the last 12 months. And you can see here from their chart, there's an estimate for 2014, which I'm pretty sure we hit, International Telecommunications Union. And you can see here, this number is the developed world, which continues to go up, the world globally, everybody, and the developing world. All trends are up. I'm not sure if this page has it or not, but most of the users in these developing countries are not using a wired connection. They're using a mobile connection. So they're using satellite technologies and cellular data to learn or have access to the internet. That's something that's different. They're just leapfrogging over all the infrastructure that was built in most of the developed world and going right to wireless technologies. And in fact, that's something you have to keep in mind as a developer or somebody who's working to develop instruction online for adults, and that is that you need to consider what we call responsive design. That means that your learning activities look good on this size of screen or an iPad screen. It's called responsive design. And if you're developing, in fact, that's what Canvas went through. They redesigned the modules that started this spring, so that was in responsive design, and that's why they brought the menu and the little, what we call a hamburger button, 3 little lines of additional menu options. When you go to a website and see the hamburger design, in fact, here's one right here, I'm looking at it with Google Chrome, 3 little bars, that means you're going to get more menu options. That's part of responsive design, and that technology is to compress and have more menu options and not have them all over the screen for scrolling. But if you're developing materials for folks that would be used outside of the US and even in the US with mobile cellular use, so you're going to want to think about these things being used on smaller screens. There's some other interesting graphs here. Internet users in 2012 as a percentage of a country's population. Obviously, dark blue, this is almost between 80 and 100% here. And then you can see in the developing countries that it goes down. In some places, there's actually no data whatsoever to suggest what the use might be. Again, the numbers that you saw, I like these graphic representations. Quickly, I can see at a glance what the world looks like as opposed to reading it along in text. This graph represents worldwide internet users, and this is an estimate in 2014, so this is a bit updated, and it's from the International Telecommunications Union. It's obviously the most recent data we have. But there are not using the internet would be about 60% of the worldwide population, 40% of the world using the internet. Users in developing countries, 32%. Users in the developed world, 78%, which mimics a little bit what we saw in that graphic. And then internet users by region, I think this is no surprise too. Still, you might say in the Americas, this would include North and South, and this would be 65% here. That's still not everybody, but if they had one here for the United States, that statistic will go way up, and we'll take another look at something that gets close to that when we look at online learning. Now, you can also look by country and where they rank. As you scroll down here, I wonder if I can put this in order by rank. There we go. First place, Iceland. Second place, Bermuda, Norway. So you can see the US is not on top of the stack. Rather, it's the Scandinavian countries that are really using internet and all have access. Also keep in mind that I think for the most part, with maybe a couple of exceptions that I'm not familiar with, we're looking at socialist countries who probably said, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to pay for it for everybody. It's not going to be something that people can have because they can afford it. And then going down, Japan, number 17, and there it is, United States. We rank 22nd with 88% of our population. So this is a really nice graphic, a graphical list on this wiki to give you some sort of idea of the use of the internet and update some of the statistics in your text. Going back then to the PowerPoint here, that was the global concerns, and now some updated U.S. online education stats. This is another pretty recent report that came out for higher education, and there's an online report card tracking the online education in the United States. So now we had internet users, now we're going to move right to online education. Brand new 2015 report card. It was just released, obviously, because we have the statistics, and it talks about some key features here. A year-to-year 3.9 increase on the number of distance education students, up from 3.7. More than 1 in 4 students, 28%, now take at least one distance course. Let's see if I can pull this out so we can read the whole thing. Totaling over nearly 6 million students, year-to-year increase. Taking all of their courses at a distance, 2.9 million. That's almost 3 million students. Public institutions command the largest portion of distance education students, so that would be folks like me here at Utah State University. 38% or 39, really almost 39% are graduate level distance students. You're in that group. Next one here, the proportion of chief academic leaders say that online learning is critical to their long-term strategy. This fell from 70% to 63% this year. Not sure what explains that. Maybe they just don't think that it's as critical because it's just kind of, it's going to happen anyway. It's already happening, so it's not like they have this big mission mandate to get there. They have already arrived. The percent of academic leaders rating the learning outcomes in online education as the same or superior to those in a face-to-face instruction is now 71%. Only 29% of academic leaders report that their faculty accept the value and legitimacy of online education. So that's 30%, kind of a flip here. Among schools with the largest distance enrollments, 60% report faculty acceptance, while 11% of the schools with no distance enrollments do so. No real surprise here. They have a really nice infographic. That's right here. So this report card then takes some of the data that we saw in the quick overview and puts them into a graphical interface, an infographic. And it talks about things like distance education over year, and it gives you the statistics mentioned, the 5.8 million students, and shows you the graph. Sometimes quickly glancing at this gives you as much information as you need, that being the trends. Let me see if I can bring this over slightly. It looks like it's kind of off screen. Now that's maybe as good as it gets. The trends in distance education or in online education. Changes in distance education by degree granting institutions. You can look at this. The most notable thing here is how private institutions have gone down, but not as far down as they were between 2012 and 2013 when public institutions really took off. And without going over every single statistic on here, I've posted this as a reference under this video. And if you want to take a look at how online education has grown, and it really has grown, and in some cases, some things are a little bit flat. But there are some pretty interesting findings here, as was pointed out on the previous page about online and face-to-face outcomes are the same. That's from academic leaders. And then meanwhile, the percentage of academic leaders online outcomes, some would say that it's inferior. It's dropped to about 28%, 28.6%. The lowest level was in 2012. So it's just another way to present the data and to show you that the trend, there are very large numbers. Most of the trends are up, and to give you some indication that this type of learning and the way adults are choosing to engage in their learning is really online. And you can see it just keeps going on and on and on with these numbers. All right. So what are the demands for online e-learning? I don't think we have to go over those anymore. They're on that chart. Remember that these kinds of these online learning can be conducted formally from an institution, non-formally from a business that's maybe interested in you knowing more about carving ducks. They might create some online modules for you to learn how to carve ducks. Blended learning, hybrid learning, flipped classroom learning, all of these situations would be using e-learning or e-learning types of tools. And blended learning is something you'll spend a little bit more time on. In the course, I've got a couple of more videos there. It's something that secondary education and to some degree post-secondary education is really experimenting with. I've had some elementary educators, and they're oftentimes the ones that I would call them the holdout for they like digital learning for tools, but they are really think that students need that socialization and that face-to-face learning, that they don't have those kinds of motivations or experiences that would get them engaged online. And I think that there's some research that supports that thought. But blended learning in a secondary or post-secondary situation, having the content, the lecture, the foundational knowledge delivered, and that would be also considered hybrid learning. And then coming together in a flipped setting where you do the lab and the discussions and the things that require that socialization or that face-to-face opportunity happens at a different time. We see those growing in post-secondary and secondary education. Of course, in informal, when I want to learn something, I might make myself some sort of way to learn about how to change a bike tire. And in fact, I wanted to educate myself a little bit more on e-learning tools, and I developed my own wiki. I actually kept a wiki of the different types of tools and different types of categories, and that's the wiki that you are using, that I've given you as a resource for your online learning module. That was my own idea of like, how am I going to keep all these really great tools straight? I know, I'll create a wiki. How do I do that? Then I had to go learn about creating wikis. That was my own self-driven, my own expectation. Nobody else was requiring me to do that. Assessment in online learning. This can be a bit of a sticky wicket, if you will. I had a student say to me, what's to keep somebody else from signing up as me and then taking the course and doing the work and taking the tests? Really, online, nothing, except for the fact that they are masquerading as you. And if they do poorly in the course, you've had to give them some credentials in the case of formal learning that is linked to your social security number and who you are. So you have to say to yourself, is it worth it? The other thing is, how much are you going to have to pay them to do that kind of thing? One other thought that she had was like, well, maybe I'll take the course, but I'm going to have them take the exams. Well, there's some different ways that online education gets around that. I think maybe some of you have been engaged in proctored exams where you go in and show identification and you take it there on computers that don't have internet access and then force and lock you down into a particular assessment. I've done those. That's one way. There's some ways to track students through a quiz or a test online. I've used those inside of Canvas. They're not foolproof. But again, you got to say, what is it I'm trying to hold them accountable for? Is it something that really requires a performance, and that they are not just they're not just 70% good at it or 80%? They are completely 100% competent. They know how to perform an appendectomy. That is a type of a learning assessment that would be different and not really something that you would want to put online. Again, sometimes we can take movies of people doing these kinds of performances and that'll work. Sometimes we can't. So traditional methods all can be used online. And I already mentioned the issues of identity. And what I mean by traditional are those paper and pencil quizzes, blogs. I've had students create blogs for me to check reading, just to make sure they're pulling out concepts that I think are being covered in that unit and that they have meaning to them. So I've had students blog to keep them engaged and provide me with some ability to give them formative assessment and use them in summative assessment because they were able to take those blogs and then use that in their final project. Just about anything inside of a traditional method that's paper and pencil or something that really just needs to be observed. If you have a technology tool like a video tool, you can probably use in e-learning. But sometimes you're going to, you may have a need where you want to see a performance. And if that performance is critical in terms of a certification that you've seen this person do this, then that's an opportunity, or that's a time when you really do need a different type of assessment. And some of the tools that we have online won't assess those types of performances. So becoming a savvy user of online resources, I already mentioned that. That is really critical. Being able to check references, having the idea of, well, I don't want to just have confirmation bias. I read something, I check one resource, and yes, it confirms what I thought. Confirmation bias is something you got to watch out for because it agrees with what you think. Go and look for critics and keep looking for critics. And that's part of being, having that open mind and getting rid of the rigidity that we sometimes see in adults as learners. Because things change. Things don't always stay the same. And I think that's one of the important takeaways from adults learning in the digital age, and that there's so much change, not just in the technology, but our ability to relearn some of the concepts because we are now being made aware of things that we didn't know of before.